Chapter 11. Now we wait. "So what now?" Steve asked from his place sitting on the spiral staircase that ran up through all 3 levels of the Valerian co-op infiltrator. Corey shrugged. "Like Jack said, we sit here with the modules. Wait for the client to come pick 'em up. The sun will be up in—" She trailed off. Skip volunteered. "Half an hour-ish." "Ish?" Steve asked, looking at the ceiling. "I'm a spaceship, not a clock." Rudy chimed in. "We're almost at the drop-off. For what it's worth, I agree. We should drop the ore module with the other one, then wait for the client. Once that's done, we can head to Selma. They have the large spaceport anyway. Will be easy to get a landing clearance." Corey nodded. She had to grab a railing set in the bulkhead near where she was standing to keep her balance. "Yeah, Jax can take care of himself, and it sounds like Naomi is even more capable." She thought for a minute. "Just to confirm, those shuttles aren't on to us, right?" Skip made a laughing, clucking kind of sound. "I'd expect you to know better, Corey. No base shuttle is going to track me unless I want it to." "Lotta ego for an AI," Steve said, standing to head up to the common deck. From his position on the module, swaying below the Osprey, Baxter beamed. "I like it better when it's just Jackson. These two talk too much." "Agreed." Rudy and Skip beamed back at the same time. The sound of heavy boots thudded above the small hatch. Jax looked at Naomi in the faint glow of their combined G-phone screens. "These mechanicals, plus the ore, should make us nearly impossible to detect." He paused as someone stomped by overhead. "At least with the gear these guys likely have." "You think those shuttles brought in gear or tech?" Naomi asked. She'd managed to smudge one side of her face with purplish dust from the ore in the modules above. It seemed to find its way everywhere. It covered every surface of the crawl space they were hiding in. "I can't imagine. They were probably dispatched to see if any ships or ground vehicles were nearby. The bypass didn't work. Something went wrong. So the engine crew got an alert. I'm sure they know the ore is gone, but I'm guessing they can't investigate until the train arrives in Selma. A lot of companies and co-ops will be clamoring for their ore." The train car bumped along and rumbled. The sound of shock troopers moving around in the narrow walkway overhead had subsided. Naomi looked at her phone. "Should we get out?" She tried to twist into a more comfortable position, unsuccessfully. Jax shook his head. He had given up trying to sit in the low clearance space. He was lying on his back, hands behind his head. "I think we should wait. When the train pulls into the Selma stockyard, it'll be bustling with activity. We can sneak out then." He took a breath. "I think." "You think?" He turned to look the woman in the eye. "Look, girlfriend, I'm a lot of things. Smuggler, occasional pirate, though rarely. Freight hauler, a bounty hunter once, but that was more an accident. Private security." He held up a finger. "Secret agent? Never been on the list." He smirked. "Or ninja, though that'd be pretty cool. I'd sign up to be a ninja." She looked at him for a minute, then sighed. "Maybe being your partner isn't a good idea." Jax blinked several times. I never offered you a partnership." She winked. "You would eventually. I'm persuasive." When he got a look on his face, she said, "Not like that, you horn dog." Jax leaned back, both hands held up. "Whoa!" She raised a purple dust-smudged eyebrow. "In the short time I've known you, I found out that sleeping with anyone of poor taste or decision-making skills is right near the top of your skills list." She grinned. "Above smuggler." "I can't help being dashingly handsome." She laughed loud enough that she clamped a hand over her mouth, her eyes darting left and right, making sure no one had heard her. Jax eyed the woman next to him that he barely knew. "So, we've got time. What's your deal?" Coming clean. Naomi inhaled. "What do you want to know? I told you about the interface program." Jax nodded slowly. "Yeah, I got that part." You're an Imperial— He held up a hand to stop her impending interruption. Former Imperial agent of some type? Meant to counter the Indies' use of droids and AI for hacking and intelligence gathering. What else? Like my family history or something? Jax nodded. She sighed, shifting again to find a comfortable position. I mean, it's nothing very exciting. I was born on Shinchaku, Hokkaido. My parents, too. Gran and Papa emigrated from Earth when they were newly married. They wanted to worship as they pleased. Religious pilgrims? Jax asked, surprised. Shinchaku, Hokkaido is more religiously tolerant than Japan on Earth. My grandparents, well, my family, are Catholic. Jax was silent a moment. My Meemaw was pretty religious. My folks weren't, and I guess I'm even less. The Japanese woman smiled. The joys of space. Plenty of room for everyone. She watched the man opposite her for a few heartbeats, as he thought over what she'd just told him. And you? I mean, I dug up a lot on Kelso, but that only covered the founding of the station forward. Where'd your grandparents come from? She shifted again, hoping to find a maybe less uncomfortable position in the tight space. A piston near her shook slightly, as it adjusted to something the train car was doing. You know, I don't know a whole lot. Meemaw was never big on family history. I know she was a— He tapped his chin, then shifted to a different lump of ore, then shifted again until he was comfortable. Protestant, I think? Never met my grandfather. He was out of the picture by the time Meemaw helped found Kelso. She never talked about him. Not sure if he was dead or what. He paused, remembering back to his childhood before the war. Dad only talked about him a few times, usually to use as an object lesson. Don't be like your grandfather, brush your teeth. If you believed my dad, my grandpa had horrible teeth, never washed his face, and only took showers on days that started with W. He grinned, remembering his father doing his best to coax a young and stubborn Jackson into the bath. The train car rocked as it passed over a small rise. Pistons hissed at each end of the car. When the rolling was done, Jax wiped his hands on his shirt. I think I'll be burning everything I have when we get back to the Osprey. Naomi nodded her agreement, then said, I saw on the Kelso station computer that your parents were independents? Jax nodded. Yeah, pretty high up. Meemaw and the other founders of Kelso were intensely staunch supporters of the Independent Systems Alliance and its core principles. She raised Dad to be a lot like her, and when the war kicked off, Mom and Dad signed up, left me on Kelso with Meemaw. He rubbed his eyes, trying to make it look like he wasn't wiping a tear away. Stupid ore dust, getting my eyes. Naomi snorted. Yeah, dust. Jax gave her a look. Anyway, they both died near the end of the war. Meemaw kept raising me until she died. Cancer. By that time, I was old enough to take care of myself, and Kelso isn't that big of a station, so folks looked out for me. Governor Singh was a good friend of Meemaw's, so she looked after me early on. I'm sorry, she put a hand on his knee. That sounds rough. He shrugged. I've had a while to work through it. He looked at her hand on his knee, and she withdrew it like she had been electrocuted. What about yours? Parents, I mean? They weren't freedom fighters, that's for damn sure. They are programmers. The look on her face told Jax a lot. I haven't seen them since I entered the interface program. How come? Did they not approve? She sighed, closing her eyes. They didn't. Probably still don't know. They're AI researchers, some of the best. When the war started, they were conscripted by the Emperor. Jax rubbed his ear. I don't understand. Why would that AI-hating Luddite conscript AI researchers? She opened her mouth to answer, but he cut her off. The Purge? She nodded. By then, of course, the war was over. The interface program had been scrapped, and most of us were dead. Dead? Both of his eyebrows were as high as physically possible on his forehead. Would you want a bunch of living intel gatherers wandering around? Especially ones that may not have exactly volunteered? You were conscripted, he surmised. Yep. I know now that he was planning the purge all along, whether he won or not. They told me my parents would be imprisoned if I didn't join the interface program. She inhaled deeply, coughed once, then said, I'm sure they were told I'd be killed if they didn't cooperate. She shrugged. I've been on the run since. Odd jobs, lying low, like at the relief camp. Stuff like that ever since. Lying low. We're sealed up, Skip said over the ceiling speakers. I've dialed up our sensor jamming, but our 2 ore modules are obviously visible if that search shuttle gets too close. It's still out there? Corey asked. They had landed nearly 30 minutes ago, just before sunrise. She and Steve were sitting at the small 2-person dining table. They had brewed a pot of coffee just after landing. Yeah, the Osprey's SI replied. We're not in any immediate danger. This little valley is pretty well protected, and that shuttle is an older Mark 7 transport. Those don't have the best sensors. Steve looked at the ceiling. Okay, we'll have to hope that shuttle doesn't come this way. Corey walked over. If that shuttle does get close enough to see the ore modules, what then? Steve shrugged. I guess we run, and hope Jax can afford to refund that Ichiko guy. When Corey made a face, he added, Honestly, no clue. Let's just do our best to make sure that doesn't happen. Rudy dropped down the center of the stairwell. We should get the ore modules covered, just in case. With the sun up, any ship in orbit or a satellite will spot the modules. Steve crossed his arms. By we, you mean us, and not you? Rudy held his slim mechanical arms, then pointed at his rollerball. Whatever helps you get your ass outside. He turned and rolled back to the stairwell. As he zipped up the center of the stairs, he added, Baxter can help. Corey looked between Steve and Baxter, who was standing near the staircase. I guess we should get out there. She stood and headed for the staircase, coffee cup in hand. Steve looked at Baxter as he stood. The droid just stared at him, red scatterlight swishing back and forth. The ore module shifted as the train car lurched to a stop. The sound and vibration of the cars further down the line, clanging against the car in front of them, echoed. Jax put his G-phone in his pocket and sat up, straining to press his ear against the hatch. Do you? Naomi started. Shh, Jax rasped. She slapped him on the shoulder. He looked back and nodded. He pressed against the metal hatch, pushing it up. He poked his head out, then lowered it. Clear. Well, if it wasn't, you'd be dead already, Naomi snapped, pushing against him. Okay, geez. He crawled up and out and offered her his hand. They stood looking around the dimly lit walkway. Their car, or another nearby, clanked as a crane similar to the one in Abda began removing modules, handing them off to people in power loaders. Here's what I'm thinking. We get out and get under the car. And then? Naomi pressed. Jax made a face. Do I have to think of everything? He jumped back just in time to avoid a fist aimed at his shoulder. Naomi turned to the hatch-up train from them. Let's go. She didn't wait for him. Getting under the train car was the easy part by far. The Salma stockyard was a hive of activity, a kicked-over hive at the moment due to the theft of several million credits worth of raw ore. Shock troopers were stomping all over the yard, their gray armor covered in the all-too-common Jebediah mud. Yard workers were scurrying around trying to do their job of unloading the train cars, while not getting in the shock troopers' way. Mixed in with that were several haughty Imperial officers in crisp crimson uniforms, barking orders at anyone who looked like they would follow them. Jax and Naomi were crouched behind one of the massive sets of wheels at the end of the train car they'd been in. As yet, no one had even glanced in their direction. Would it be rude to ask, now what, again? The runaway interface said. Rude and unnecessary, Jax replied, without looking over at her, his eyes scanning the scene around the train. Unlike Abda, where the train pulled along the perimeter of the stockyard, In Salma, the train pulled right into the middle of the much larger yard. The spaceport ring wall was visible in the distance, freighters moving in and out of the port on powerful lift engines. Jax finally looked at Naomi. "Think they're looking for signals? We could call the others, have them meet us at the spaceport." She shook her head. "No idea. Probably best to wait until we're at least outside the stockyard." Jax nodded.